Hello and welcome back to the Hyperness Podcast. During this fantastic chat, we talk with some of the most influential people in the area of Web3 and beyond. Today I have the great pleasure to discuss with Melvis, that is the Executive Director of the Canton Foundation. Canton Foundation is making waves, creating an enormous amount of volume. I think the last discussions were around 300 billion just in repo, and getting on board essentially a lot of FMI, so financial market infrastructures, and trying, I think, to structure the way how TradFi finally is embracing distributed ledger technology. But before we get into the details of it, I would like to know a little bit more about Melvis and how Melvis got into Canton, because Melvis, you look like the perfect person in the perfect time with the perfect background, right? So connecting Web3 and TradFi. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you got into Canton.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. Happy to be here today and looking forward to the conversation. My name is Melvis and I'm the Executive Director of the Canton Foundation. And at high level, Canton provides the layer one public permissionless chain that facilitates institutional finance, in the sense that we provide the combination of configurable privacy, controls, and also interoperability to enable the largest institutions and even individual and entrepreneurs to build blockchain applications. We'll dive more into that later. But personally, my journey to the Canton ecosystem initially started out in traditional finance, where I worked across Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan across the capital markets functions, from risk management all the way to macro trading and electronic trading. I was there for almost a decade, and then the crypto bug hit me in around 2015, 2016, when I was doing research around some Greek government bonds during the Brexit timeframe, where I read an article highlighting some people were moving assets from their banks as those banks were getting nationalized into a thing called Bitcoin. Having studied economics at university, this new asset struck me as very fascinating because it was a technology and then also an asset that was a store of value, censorship resistant, and it had the components of what money is, right? And so went down the rabbit hole, be trading on the daytime, at night, learning more about crypto and blockchain at night. Eventually, the drive grew and grew, and then I ended up joining one of the top global crypto exchanges, OKX, to lead the market maker program and strategic partnership initiatives. And then most recently, as the maturity of the ecosystem has have grown and the conversion between TradFi and crypto has become very, very in vogue, building my experiences and merging the TradFi experience and the crypto experience that I've gained over the years became perfect to find an opportunity that bridges those two. And so I had the opportunity to interview and join to lead the foundation. And with everything we're doing at Canton today, I'll explain more about why it was the perfect seat for me.
That's fantastic. So first of all, thanks a lot for the intro. So this incredible interconnection between TradFi experience, Web3 experience, and the crypto bug entering in the right time in your life in 2015. It was actually early enough that in the end probably made you the right man at the right time. So that's great. So let's talk a little bit more about the architecture of Canton, because I think one of the main USP of Canton is the privacy and the programmability of privacy. That is, I think, a must for several TradFi solutions. But at the same time, and I think that is another important USP, you have the possibility to interconnect, different divided distributed ledgers, somehow different domains, via the so-called global synchronizers. Therefore, there is these all private domains that can have, private transaction, and only some party involved can see part of the transaction, but then there is also the global synchronizer that create composability. Tell us a little bit more on how this structure works, because it seems like that you are trying to solve this problem of siloed structured, isolated structures, and privacy at the same time.
Yeah, so in order to jump into answering the question, I think I'll go back a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about how we got to where we are. And
Yes.
so going back into a little historical lessons in the beginning days of Bitcoin's development across the forums, initially transparency was a bug and privacy was a feature. But then somewhere in between the development, it ended up flipping where transparency became the feature and privacy became the bug. And so Bitcoin ended up launching as on a public permissionless chain where it was a censorship resistant asset and every single transaction was publicly available for everyone to see. But beyond that, following Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, every other chain that came about also went with the flow of having everything on a single ledger, publicly permitted, everything everyone does, everyone can see. So this whole binary aspect of facilitating things that can either be a public versus private, permission versus permissionless, or transparent versus confidential across blockchains became the main aspect of building within chains. However, if you take a step back in like real life, things aren't homogeneous. Things aren't binary. There's some components of life that are private, some components that are transparent. But for some reason, on the blockchain side, it was one or the other. And then the perfect example about life is that pretty much everyone uses the largest network public permissionless in the world, which is the internet. On the internet, you're able to go to a private website like your bank account and you have access controls, different apps to use. And on the internet, you can go to a public website, a public app, and where you like a website like Wikipedia or sports or news website. So the dynamic nature of public and private, there's not always a huge interlock within it. So why is it that within blockchain we always have to facilitate that? So in terms of over the past 10 years, the contributing teams that built Canton predominantly digital asset, understanding, researching, collaborating with the different capital markets players, and taking lessons from the different chains that exist, they identify that one of the core fundamental tenets for institutions to enter blockchains is configurable privacy. So being able to launch a network with the core architecture that allows you to have sub-transaction level, all the way down to UTXO level, being able to coordinate the privacy and controls is something that is very key and necessary for the growth and development within blockchains. And so launching an application that is publicly permissionless is very key because it allows for the interoperability and composability of assets to happen. So that's what we did. But then on top of that too, facilitating the configurable privacy is something that's also needed so that you don't have to keep making that binary trade-offs between public only, private only, and then not having the easeability of composability across one or the others. And so to bring all this in within Canton, are a network of networks in the sense that there are multiple different multiple different subnets within Canton, but the beauty is that all of them may have different levels of privacy, controls around access, finality, and also stability, in addition to risk controls and compliance. But they can all talk to each other and interoperate natively on Canton, as opposed to each network which exists on a public permissionless side across crypto, where there's one single ledger, everyone gets to see everything, everyone has to inherit the full governance and throughput of the whole chain. That's not the case for us. For us, it's unlimited horizontal scaling. Should you want to, you can have your own governance structures, but then be able to interoperate under what you highlighted earlier, the global synchronizer. So that's how we're currently structured.
Okay, that's very fascinating design, right? It's trying to probably get together the best of several worlds, right, and make it viable for financial market infrastructure or in general TradFi institutions basically to use finally distributed ledger. Seems fantastic. And I think one of the consequences of it, one of the beautiful consequences of it is also that practically MEV, it is addressed because there isn't a public mempool where essentially people can front run, back run, sandwiching, and all of that. Is that right?
That is true. That is true. It's on Canton because of the private nature of the architecture. You cannot really have MEV occur in terms of activities around trading. And the great thing is that depending on how the application is structured, the application developer or even the asset issuer can enable who gets to see what transactions when, and then who also gets to interact with their application and their transaction. So it isn't just one global open architecture layer where everyone, or isn't just one global blockchain layer that everyone gets to see everything whenever they want to. You can have the granular controls of your own application in addition to the assets that are facilitated on the blockchain.
That's very cool. This was one of the, I mean, the problem that we always had this public mempool, and these, and we tend to accept it over time, MEV, although it is not really acceptable. I think we're going to fix it at some point, but it's beautiful to see that, well, in Canton, almost doesn't
Yeah.
exist this issue, right?
And that's one of the biggest things. Like, if you start thinking about traditional markets, like there are literally rules and regulations against front running and being able to basically, yeah, pay your way or use infrastructure in order to just get ahead of everyone deliberately in that regard. And so, yeah, the structure of Canton can basically be able to build applications that fit different regulatory jurisdictions and also requirements as well.
That's great. Maybe maybe you can describe, step by step, or what happened when ideally two different institutions or applications in two different domains want to um, have some level of interoperability. So let's assume that there is one transaction happening in one domain, then a transaction happening in another domain, that is in the middle of the global synchronizer. Maybe you can simplify with a step by step process.
Yeah. So in terms of applications that launch on Canton, every single app or every single engagement within Canton can decide who they want to get involved in. So at a core level, there are super validators who are the
Hmm.
operators of the interoperability layer. There are the validators who facilitate the ordering and routing of every transaction within a specific subnet. And then lastly, each application on the network also runs a validate in order to facilitate who they want to engage within their own application. And so, with your question about how multiple applications may interact or talk to each other in order to facilitate or compose a transaction, it
Hmm.
all ends up coming down to the application developers' idea of what they want to do. So if they want the transaction to initially be facilitated within their initial core subset of users and validators, they can facilitate everything within their own instance, within their own network as they choose. But then once they're opening it up to enable their asset to compose a transaction with another asset across Canton, both assets or both applications then interact with the global synchronizer in order to facilitate the atomic settlement of that transaction. So composing the atomicity of settlement for those two different transactions. And a perfect example of this, it was recently facilitated in the summer and then in October when we
Hmm.
did the live production trades with the DTCC. And for
Hmm.
people who don't know, the DTCC is the largest central securities depository in the world. It currently has over $100 trillion worth of assets across equities, government bonds, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, agencies, and the likes. And they worked with us at using the Canton blockchain in order to digitally natively issue a U.S. Treasury and then trade it against stablecoins across different market participants. So in this case, and how this ties back to the structure that I just talked about, there was a tokenization application, which DTCC tokenized a treasury. There was a stablecoin app, which was USDC, which they used that for the trade. And then there was a financing app, a repo app to allow for the trading capability. So with all these three different apps, they structured their own governance, access controls, finality, and anything more granular that they want to in terms of also the privacy levels that they want. And then beyond that, they all connected to the global synchronizer in order to then facilitate the trading activities, the atomic transaction activities across the different parties that participated. Within this experience, the counterparts who were involved were DTCC, TradeWeb, Bank of America, Virtu, Citadel, DRW Cumberland, and also Sachs, Societe Generale, the bank. So all these banks, TradFi related, very regulated, very privacy focused, but they all were able to have the confidence that Canton works and can facilitate what their current business needs were, in the sense that they all traded transactions. There was a need to know basis in terms of what they needed to see, what they could transact in, and their data and transaction activities were not publicly broadcasted to everyone. So the great thing is that the structure of Canton with the privacy and controls capabilities enable them to fit their current workflows and structures. And then the beauty of blockchain, which is the composability nature of it, transactions were able to be composed across the different apps and across the different assets that were created, all on the Canton blockchain. So that was beautiful. That was very beautiful to see.
That is very impressive. And well, also thanks for mentioning DTCC. I think that you are in partnership with them. And apart from these first experience that you had together, first transaction, I think many new things will happen in 2026, at least from what I read. So this year. So what are you cooking? As you say, there are 100 trillion on the line. That's quite a lot of assets. So is there any additional tokenization that you are considering on the Canton blockchain, or anything else that you are planning with DTCC?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit specific about DCC and then other partnerships that are in the works or have already been recently announced. So with the DTCC, the U.S. Treasury transaction was one of the key ones, and then in December they received a no action letter from the SEC, so saying that they were able to now start the launch of their tokenization service, which will expand the different assets that they'll be bringing on a blockchain. So from not just the treasury work that we've done, but eventually equities, ETFs, corporate bonds, munis, and other assets that they have within their 100 trillion business. And then beyond the work on the tokenization side, we've also, payments is another vertical. So a Circle integrated natively with Canton to allow for private stablecoin payments. We integrate money market funds such as Hash Notes USYC, in addition to Benji from Franklin Templeton. Collateral mobility is another key vertical, because like end of the day, you can tokenize different assets, but what can you do after the fact with those assets? So through the initiatives with collateral mobility, we working with NASDAQ in order to facilitate collateral mobility within their application called Calypso. And with collateral mobility, people could use different tokenized assets in order to be pledged for margining in derivative trades and the likes. And the great thing is that this is all done with privacy. Outside of this, our network expands to facilitate tokenization of assets, as I mentioned. So initially from treasuries, private credit, private equity, all the way to initiatives around sports betting, and then also life insurance and annuities as well. So those are all the institutional stuff that are happening, so B2B aspects, but then we're also, the network facilitates the ability of applications from B2B to C and also peer-to-peer. So on the DeFi side, where most crypto native communities come from, Canton is a full public permissionless blockchain, so you can launch applications that are fully transparent if you choose to. So we have teams building across DeFi, so from DEXs, regular DEXs, dark pool DEXs, prediction markets with privacy, which is going to be exciting to see, in addition to borrow lending and even vault products as well.
Okay, that's very interesting.
There's a huge breadth of things that yeah.
There is quite an enormous amount of things that are happening at the same time on the B2B level, also, as you say, B2B to C, traditional DeFi with privacy or not privacy. Okay. And I mean, I think one of the most interesting headline was the volume of repo, I think coming from Broadridge. And the one alone was generating, I don't know, 200, 300 billion in volume per day. You want to tell us a little bit more about it, because it seems to be, a great source of traction, at least.
Yeah. So the beauty about Canton is, as we said, configurable privacy. So end of the day, Broadridge is the main premier partner that has been able to integrate their feeds into RWA XYZ. But at the end of the day, it's up to the asset issuer to decide what assets they want to be publicly available to be tracked or to be distributed on different platforms. So with the Broadridge case, and then maybe I should also explain what a repo is, or what's the...
Maybe you can provide, a brief definition of a repo, because maybe not everyone is well-versed in repo.
So a repo is a lending agreement. It's called repurchase agreement, which allows for someone to enter into a lending deal where the lending and repurchase of the asset that they're posting as collateral happens after a couple of days, weeks, or months, should they choose. And repos are typically used for short-term financing between some of the largest financial institutions. And so with Canton, on Canton, Broadridge is is a financial markets infrastructure player that facilitates more than 10% of the daily repo transactions within the US, and it's about a $10 trillion market. So when you think about them doing 400 billion a day, the broader repo market is much bigger. And another key thing that our crypto native ecosystem partners need to understand is that the crypto market is around like 3.5-ish trillion. But then when you zoom out, TradFi is over like 400 trillion, should you think about it in terms of high quality liquid assets out there. So the repo that we're doing is pretty significant, but it is a $10 trillion a day market. So Broadridge is a market leader within repo transactions, and a specific type of repo, so short-term lending deals that they're doing with TradFi include like intraday repo, sponsored repo, bilateral repo as well. So different types of repo trades depending on the counterpart. And so it's short-term lending, and the great thing about using Canton to facilitate is that now there's capital efficiency that can happen within the repo trade, and on top of that too, operational efficiencies can also be unlocked with repo transaction. Because not until recently, but previously, TradFi transaction used to settle like T+3. So you do a transaction today, you need to mobilize the payments over a 3-day time. So there's a huge monetary gap there, or pre-funding that typically needed to happen. But by facilitating these activities on blockchain and using stable coins as the cash leg versus the repo tokenized asset, like this allows for better capital efficiencies for the partners, and overall to operational efficiencies, because there's less messaging and reconciliation that needs to happen after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks for mentioning it, because it would have been my next question. But how faster are we talking about? So if originally was T+3, as you mentioned, now it can be T+0. So it's basically the same day, same hours.
Yeah. So now there's even the ability to do quicker, like more intraday repo, like being able to borrow like in the morning and then do the reverse repo by the afternoon, should you choose, or close out the deal, close out the repo term much faster. So definitely this is more efficient in terms of getting the funding needed for certain transactions activities.
Yeah, that's great. And usually, who are let's say, the actors that are interacting with
Yeah.
the
So
Broadridge?
it would be banks, brokerages, prime brokers as well. Those are the key participants here. Asset managers could use repo for funding. And in fact, like when I was during my TradFi days, I worked on the central funding desk as well at Goldman Sachs before the macro. And with that, that's like facilitating the plumbing, so doing the securities financing, which includes repos and securities lending as well. So these types of activities to help trading desks either facilitate their trading activities or even corporates to be able to facilitate their funding and financing for the business that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think that it is fantastic to see how we can, with distributed ledger technology, make the classical financial system, faster, more efficient, as you say, in terms of speed, in terms of reconciliation, in terms of, all these processes, simplification of these processes. One one question I had for you, somewhere I think there were a headline about 6 trillion in assets or 6 trillion in volume. I mean, this number is already, enormous. As you say, the current uh, all crypto world is less basically than 4 trillion, is 3.5 or something, right? Depends on the price of Bitcoin very often. Where does 6 trillion come from? Are assets on chain or assets that you want to tokenize, or is volume for Canton?
So it's assets on different partners, blockchain instances within Canton, in the sense that we also facilitate like syndicated loans, as I mentioned, private equity, like iCapital, which is one of the largest fund feeders, is on Canton with billions of dollars worth of funds within their ecosystem. And then also, if you think about it, we have partners who are building life insurance and annuity assets as well. And so all these things composed together makes the number big. But as I mentioned, you need to zoom out and think about TradFi. And it says that those are real assets that people are facilitating. And within crypto, we sometimes think too micro in terms of what's happening immediately within the ecosystems on crypto, but not thinking about the broader network of finance or the world where there are way more assets that are being facilitated across different jurisdictions or products themselves. And then
Yeah,
with Canton, the thing is that configurable privacy, everything isn't publicly on the ledger. It depends on the issuer or the business to enable what they want everyone to see.
yeah. Well, that's super interesting and super crazy at the same time. When a few years ago we were hypothesizing, that the so-called real world assets would have been bigger than the crypto assets on chain, there were a few people believing on it. But as of today, considering what you are just discussing, that's already happened. So if we are discussing about $6 trillion assets, on Canton, I think on Corda say they have around 17 trillion between different, different domains or different sub systems that they also have, and uh, and other players. It seems that already, the crypto market is not that big as you said, but it was destiny, considering to the general financial system. So if we want to um, move forward also with this comparison, I think that the peculiar design of Canton really created almost like the perfect environment for this FMI to come to use distributed ledger technology. But we have seen also other type of, let's say, attempt or other type of structure. One of them, for example, is Corda, that they started a little bit earlier than you guys. I think a lot earlier, maybe many years ago. But they have a completely different approach, and I think that the main differentiator is really the lack of somehow composability or interconnection between the different applications. So, how do you see, the main differences and the main similarities between Canton and Corda.
Yeah, so I would say basically, at the end of the day, the beauty of public permissionless blockchains, and you mentioned, is the composability, right? And without composability, we are just sitting within the current structures of how businesses work and how markets work, where things are in compartmentalized sections and in isolated islands or sovereign applications that don't talk to each other. And you won't be able to get a lot of innovation and growth in those types of networks, right? If you think about it, with the internet, which arguably is the biggest public permissionless network, it has the capability of having some private instances and some public instances. So for us, identifying that part of the challenges for the Corda or Hyperledger had been that they are isolated applications that are being created where you need to be permission into it to engage with it. And then within that, even if you have that launched, it doesn't interoperate with anyone else on a different application outside of itself. So the biggest difference between Canton is that we built a public permissionless blockchain, but it had the components to facilitate the configurable privacy and controls, and also facilitate the interoperability for the different assets and products that get launched. And with that, today, you can create a private app if you want to, a public app if you want to, an app with a mix of the two, and be seamlessly able to natively interoperate your products and assets within the network. Versus on Corda, if you created an application and you have assets facilitated in it, guess what? They're just stuck there. They won't be able to talk to other instances unless it's within that same subnet that the asset comes from. So the
Yeah,
beauty is our interoperability plus the privacy preserving solutions all in one.
yeah. I think I think it's the main revolutionary aspect, right? Because if we build another intranet, so
Yeah,
what would I mean? Of
that's it.
course, we can build our intranet and then talk with one each other, maybe increase our efficiency. But if we don't talk with the others, in the end, the real revolution with internet is when we connected all the intranet and we built internet, right?
Yes, that's the thing.
Before everyone, right? Sorry, go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and that's another thing. That's why we say Canton is a network of networks, because different
Hmm.
networks can spin up, and then outside of that, those networks can interoperate very, very seamlessly to engage in business initiatives. Yep.
Yeah. And what do you think on the other side of, Ethereum L1 or potentially all the L2? Because the whole roadmap also of Ethereum is going more toward privacy. Ethereum per se have some plan. There are L2 more focused on privacy, like for example Aztec, using a combination of zero knowledge proof, homomorphic encryption, a little bit of TE also here and there. How do you see, the interconnection or the similarity or complementarity even
Yeah.
between Canton and Ethereum and Ethereum privacy in general?
So, so that's a good question, in the sense that within Ethereum, at its core, initially it's a public permissionless blockchain, one key ledger, everything is transparent, right?
Hmm.
And then from
Yeah.
there have been teams that have come in to build scaling solutions, which basically implemented and augments some certain current components, but then it still rolls up back into the main EVM state.
Hmm.
And with this, the thing is that these things are, even though they're still part of Ethereum to some degree, they're not natively interoperable, in the sense that you need bridges to make these Ethereum L2s talk to each other.
Hmm.
On Canton, all these individual subnets are fully interoperable, in the sense that it's natively built into the Canton blockchain. So on ETH, these are all sub instances that need to use messaging to some degree to talk to each other again.
Hmm.
And guess what? Year in and year out, the biggest vulnerabilities that usually happen across crypto is typically bridge
Bridges.
attacks, right?
Yeah.
Those bridge attacks, and so that's not great. On top of this, you mentioned some of the privacy, quote unquote privacy features within the Ethereum world, and like ZK and the likes. One thing that we always want to highlight is that with zero knowledge, it's a great technology to facilitate anonymity, in the sense that if you don't want anyone to know who the other person on the other side is, and it's a black box, you get an output, and then you blindly trust that it's correct. Yes, that works. That's great. But if you think about engaging in privacy for institutions, it's not about anonymity. It's more about configurable privacy in a need to know basis to enable selective disclosure, and also being able to also audit the data that you're getting. And so with zero knowledge proofs, many large institutions cannot build a product and put in ZK and formally go back to a regulator and say, "Oh yeah, just trust me that I trust the application is using zero knowledge, but I don't know what is in it. I just trust that it's correct." And so this wouldn't really work out if, for example, like Circle, they're regulated, and so with USDC, they need to basically be able to attest to some of the transaction activity and see what's happening. And so if they use zero knowledge, and for some reason, if that get compromised and more USDC tokens are generated, no one will be able to see that vulnerability because it's a black box and you just trust it. But the great thing about how Canton is architectured, the privacy goes to a sub-transaction level, and it can be audited, and also there could be a need-to-know basis in terms of who gets to see what. In the sense that the business that's using Canton to create a privacy application or asset, they can allow the regulators to see what they need to see, the auditors to see what they need to see, the legal, their accountants, their internal risk and compliance team to only see the things that they need to see when they need to see it. So this allows Canton's network applications and partners to build solutions that can fit different geographical regulatory regimes, from the U.S. CFTC to SEC all the way to Europe, for example, GDPR, in the sense that with GDPR, you need to be able to have some data minimalization rules, and the right to forget, and those types of things can be facilitated due to the granular configurable privacy and controls that we offer. So the privacy solution so far within EVMs have been like ZK, but that's anonymity. And so that's very different from having core granular privacy to fit the right needs of the application or the user.
Yeah, I really like how you have defined it, with this granularity in the programmability of privacy, right? To fit different compliance, reason, or, I don't want to show what's happening in my book, because I don't want, because otherwise maybe I can give away some specific strategic secret of my on my own, or I want to only that my partner sees certain transaction, the auditor sees certain transactions. I think that this is definitely very powerful. It seems really designed for FMI, and it doesn't look like an afterthought, right? So it looks like you have done the math before that.
Yeah, so it's built on a fundamental level, and the things that with the existing blockchains right now, they'll need to like bolt on privacy to try to make it fit. And in fact, like earlier, not earlier last year, I think like in April or March, like Solana had a confidential transfers solution that almost got a vulnerability. It was using ZK, and literally that would have been a big issue should it happen. That's what happens when it wasn't like for us. It's from a fundamental level where the privacy features are built from the ground up, versus now the others are trying to bolt it on, and there could be issues that may happen. And with ZK, if a vulnerability does formally happen, it's hard to track it, because you cannot, it's not auditable. It's just a black box that you hope that ideally the tech is as good as it should be in terms of why it should happen.
I see. Would you say that these privacy superpower or this granular programmable privacy is also a function of the DAML language that you're using. So
Yeah.
for the
So
creation of obligation rights. Mhm.
exactly. So we use a demo which is built under the functions of Haskell, which allows it's a functional programming language.
Mhm.
So the granular level of business logic can be built in to fit like a traditional, let's say, legal contract. So being able to piecemeal identify what each counterpart should do, or the sub-transaction level activities of the application can be built into that as well.
Okay, so it seems to be, the perfect or a very good language for really defining obligation rights, like the just a traditional contract, between
Exactly.
parties.
Yeah,
Correct?
that's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. At the same
And then
time,
and then
mhm,
with that, you just brought up something. So for us, when we think about like tokenization of
mhm,
real world asset, we are thinking about the basically bringing on chain the native core asset. And what we mean about that is bringing on chain the rights, the obligations, and the claims to the underlying assets on chain. So that's the native digital asset, and it says that there isn't any like off chain warehouses or SPVs or BVI funds that are holding the asset. Where typically in crypto today, when people talk about tokenization, it's just an IOU to those assets, but then the true ownership doesn't really rely on people with the token. But the beauty about Canton is that now we're able to fully program all of these rights, obligations, and claims into the smart contract to facilitate that if I send you a bond, that bond that you hold has all of the rights and claims to it. In the sense that if I went bankrupt, you still have the full bond that you can use as to claim the assets that you were transacting on. Versus today, with some of the assets that are out there, if something happened, you have to go to the broker and be within the full bankruptcy claims proceedings. So from the secured debt to the unsecured debt to preferred equity, and then to common equity, and then maybe tokens, right? So
yeah.
with Canton, it's like you're holding the real asset. And if it's equity tokens on Canton, it would also be like you get the voting rights to it as well if it's tokenized in the native fashion. And our blockchain facilitates the ability to facilitate these things. Partly why the DTCC's work with us has been very instrumental, because they warehouse all those assets, so the native assets can be tokenized with the business that they have.
Yeah. Well, I've been studying a bit about it, and I see why, this is so powerful and so useful, I think, for Canton. To obviously, the question would be, of course, what is the complexity for new developers to learn about DAML, right? So obviously, this was the devil's advocate question that probably you have received several times, right?
Yep.
So this is the question number one. And how I know there is already Canton Polyglot in the making. So are you already trying to address it, with Canton Polyglot? And how will be the developer experience for,
Yeah. Obviously,
approaching Camel?
Yeah, obviously this is a brand new smart contract language, and so there's a journey to take in order to get acclimated. But the great thing is that it's a new and burgeoning network. So builders who are coming in see that there is a new challenge for them to take. But the great thing is that them building on Canton is a big advantage, because they are not going to be the 100th DEX or 100 DeFi protocol launching on the EVM's line. This is a new opportunity for them, and then also unlock new protocol primitives that they can launch with privacy and controls. And then on top of that, too, the foundation itself has been actively doing different network audits in order to understand what are the key resources, reference apps, and also tools that are needed to help the developer ecosystem jumpstart and build applications. In doing so, we launched our first hackathon series in October, which